night security at this pretty interesting place. For the record, I still work there and might have more strange stories to share in the future. I'm a 38-year-old guy, and I've had my fair share of security jobs, from clubs to hot tubs and even a small movie theater. But this place is unique. It's home to mostly retired doctors, lawyers, and other wealthy folks. There are also some younger residents, like stockbrokers and real estate agents. It's located in a well-known tourist town in the US. The building itself has 12 exits on the first floor. Doors are locked at 11 p.m., so you can exit but can't get back in. This one particular night was during the summertime, and it was unusually warm after the sun had set. My shift started at 11 o'clock, and I had to take over from my coworker, who gave me a heads up about the sliding doors to the parking lot, which often get stuck. She mentioned that confronting anyone wasn't part of the job, and we couldn't detain anyone. We're mainly there to be the eyes and ears, and if trouble arises, we called the police. Of course, we can defend ourselves if necessary, but our first line of action is to call the police. That's company policy. So I usually walk the premises, keep an eye on the cameras in the security office, and stay vigilant. When a resident calls with a maintenance request, I take down the info in the event log and answer with the standard, "This is Security Officer James, how can I help you?" One night I got a call, but all I heard was heavy breathing. Looking at the cameras, I noticed a figure standing just beyond the reach of the front door camera. I could see the guy in the open call box, but when he picked up the phone, he said nothing. I asked, "How can I help you?" The breathing got heavier, and then he burst into maniacal laughter. It was a laugh you'd expect from a movie villain before something terrible happens. I decided to head to the door before he could say anything else, letting him know that the cops were on their way and he should leave. He tried the doors, but they were locked this time. He moved to another call box, and this guy was running fast from one call box to another. The doors had quite a gap between them outside. He taunted me, saying, "I can see you. Are you ready to die? Because the cops won't make it here in time." I pretended to have a conversation with another security officer, making sure no one was around. Pepper spray was ready in my hand, but it was empty outside. I returned to my desk and logged the incident. About half an hour later, I had finished my rounds and was about to do another when the phone rang again. This time, the call came from an unknown number. I picked up, thinking it might be a resident with a repair request, and I said, "This is Security Officer James. How can I help you?" The voice on the other end said, "Where are the cops? I don't see them, but I see you." The day manager's office was across from the security room, and I ran to unlock the door. I pulled up the shades and shone my flashlight through the window. That's when I saw his face, a hooded man, about 40, with wild eyes and stringy hair. He grinned, then tried to break the window by smashing his head against it. I yelled at him, letting him know the police were on the way. I was ready with pepper spray, but I didn't want to engage in a physical confrontation. This guy was acting erratically, maybe on drugs. He tore the call box off the hook and did the same at other call boxes, jamming the company phone line. He was unbelievably fast, running between the boxes. Then things got creepier. The sliding door to the lodge was open, which was unusual. It's known for getting stuck, but this time it was different. I locked the second set of doors just in case. He either had to slow down or get trapped. I had my pepper spray, hoping he'd leave. I yelled that the police were on their way. He laughed, held up his knife, and made stabbing motions while mouthing, "Die, die, die." His face slammed into the glass, and he ran off into the darkness. 5 minutes later, the cops arrived. They sent one officer to take my statement. I described the guy, but he had vanished by then. The police never caught him. The next morning, my manager came in for the day shift. I informed her about the incident, and they decided to be more cautious. An extra security guard was added to my shift for 2 weeks, but the guy never returned, and he was never found. To cope with this experience, I took on a night shift at Walmart, but things got weird there too, as I encountered a guy who seemed to know me. It led to an unsettling series of events, including potential stalking. I started taking precautions and bought pepper spray, all because of that creepy presence from my previous job. So this whole thing went down about 2 years back. I used to work at this hotel, you know. It had 50 rooms, spread across 3 floors, and I was the only one holding the fort after 5 p.m. And for context, I'm a girl. This place was on the outskirts of the city, but it was in the nice part, so we'd often get workers from various companies for their room and board instead of those sketchy motels on the other side of town. Some guests were great, but others, well, they could really trash the place. That's just how it goes. The hotel layout was simple, easy to navigate. You'd come in through the front entrance, head to the foyer, and our front desk was right there through those automatic doors. Just across the lobby was a staircase going up to the 2nd floor. And to the left, we had the elevators to the 2nd and 3rd floors. On the 1st floor, you'd only find rooms on one side. The other side had our pool, workout room, breakfast dining area, lobby, and the office. The upper floors had rooms on both sides, with the 3rd floor having the most. We usually kept the 3rd floor for business travelers and long stays. The 2nd floor was for shorter stays and bigger groups, while the 1st floor was open for seniors with wheelchairs or walkers or folks who arrived late for a one-night stay. And don't worry, all this detail is relevant to the story. Now, on the night of this incident, it was nearing the end of my shift, and it was pretty quiet, aside from a few work groups I'd checked in earlier. I happened to notice this beat-up black pickup truck rolling into the well-lit carport, so I got my paperwork ready for a check-in. The guy who got out was completely covered in dirt, like head to toe. I figured he'd just finished work, which was pretty common around here. He also had that distinct smell, the kind you'd expect from an oil field or construction worker. So I didn't think too much of it. I checked his credentials, and his name was Michael. He was a bit hesitant to leave his vehicle info with me, but I explained that if he didn't, his truck might get towed overnight. He must have decided it was better to share. After all, he was just staying one night. Michael asked for a 2nd floor room close to the lobby staircase so he could easily access the front doors for smoking. That wasn't out of the ordinary either. I got all his payment details sorted, explained our parking rules, and how to reach his room. His room was just up the staircase, right by the wall opposite the entrance. He had a few bags with him and he went upstairs. But almost instantly he came back down the stairs and accused me of giving him faulty room keys. I had to explain that if the keys got too close to a phone or a magnet, they'd deactivate. I even offered to go upstairs with him and open the room to make sure the new keys worked, which they did. He entered the room, shut the door, and I went on my way back to the lobby. Now, when I got back to the office, something caught my eye on the cameras. Michael hadn't left the building, but his truck wasn't out front anymore. He hadn't mentioned bringing someone else with him, but if that was the case, we'd have to charge an extra $10 10 feet per person. The side doors didn't open unless you had a room key or were on the inside, so I started keeping an eye on the cameras to make sure he wasn't trying to sneak anyone in. About 20 minutes passed, and I didn't see anything happening except for Michael coming down the stairs. He went outside, presumably for a smoke, and stood in the carport for about 10 minutes. Seemed normal at first, so I just went back to my paperwork. But then he came running back in, cigarette still in his mouth. I told him he needed to take the cigarette outside and put it out. After all, we didn't allow smoking inside. He just tossed the cigarette on the ground and crushed it with his shoe. Then he turned his attention to the TV, sitting in the lobby for what felt like an eternity. He kept glancing at the front door, which made me increasingly uncomfortable. During this time, his friendly demeanor from check-in had completely vanished, replaced by paranoia and agitation. He started whispering to himself, and I couldn't make out what he was saying. After about 30 minutes of this odd behavior, I told him he needed to head to his room. I explained that guests couldn't hang out in the lobby while I did closing procedures. It was a bit of a white lie, but management allowed us to make up reasons if we felt uncomfortable with a guest lingering. So, Michael wasn't happy about it, but he went upstairs. But almost instantly, he came back down saying he'd forgotten where his room was. I couldn't leave the office, but I did my best to describe how to find his room. It was pretty straightforward, so I thought he'd be fine. He kept whispering, this time about losing his phone, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I explained where his room was and watched him head back upstairs. The door slammed shut, and that sound echoed throughout the 2nd and 1st floors, sending shivers down my spine for some reason. Almost immediately he came back down, and this time he was yelling at me, accusing me of stealing his cell phone. He claimed I was planning something terrible, and he insisted I find his phone. It was all nonsense, as I hadn't left the office since making sure his room key worked. He asked for my help, and I just wanted him to go away, so I slipped a screwdriver into my pocket just in case he tried to attack me. I started searching the lobby couches for his phone. I didn't find it, but I did come across his credit card. He accused me of stealing that too, but I stood my ground. I told him that if he couldn't respect me in my workplace, I'd call the police and have them escort him to his room or off the property. He got angrier, snatched his card back, and went outside. About 20 more minutes passed, and he returned, visibly calmer. He asked if I could go outside with him because there was something wrong with his car. I refused, explaining I wasn't allowed to accompany guests outside. He began insisting that I had to go out with him, and he wouldn't let it go. Anxiety was building up, and I felt a panic attack coming on. So, I called the owners and asked for their advice. It was my first hotel job, and even though I had a lot of freedom in my role, I wanted to know how to handle these situations properly. The owner told me that if I felt uncomfortable or suspected the guest was under the influence or posed a danger, I could call the police and have them ban him from the property. So, I locked all the lobby doors, secured the side and fire exits, and made sure everything was shut tight so no one could sneak in. I was still on the phone with my boss, who advised me to keep an eye on the cameras and have my cell phone close by in case I needed to call for help. As I was watching the cameras, I noticed that I couldn't see Michael anymore. I didn't know where he'd parked, but I certainly wasn't going to go look for his truck. What did catch my attention, though, was another vehicle driving through our parking lot. I called the hotel next door to check if they had the car on their cameras, and they confirmed that it was an unknown vehicle to them as well. It had disappeared from my view. Since it was almost the end of my shift, I rushed to finish my tasks just in time for the next shift to arrive. I was relieved to see her. I practically wanted to cry. I explained everything to her, and the owners wanted us to keep the lobby doors locked. We put up signs claiming our doors were broken, and for safety reasons, guests would have to call for entry or use the side entrances. I also deactivated Michael's room keys and told the next shift girl not to let him back in. If he showed up, she was to call the police because he was a security risk. It wasn't true, but we didn't want him around at all. When I saw Michael the next time, about a month later, he was inquiring about his stuff and whether he could book a room. I declined to give him a room, and thankfully, there were others present in the lobby and office. Our maintenance person retrieved his belongings and made it clear that he was no longer welcome on the property. We told him that if we saw him again, the police would be called, and he'd be arrested for trespassing. That was also not true, but we really didn't want him returning. One thing that stuck with me, though, was that he remembered my name. When he approached the counter, he addressed me by my name. At first, I thought it was because my name was on my uniform, but then I realized I hadn't worn my name tag that day. After that, I refused to wear one, and management allowed me to create a fake name, which I used from then on. It took a while for me to feel safe in the building again when I was alone. During my evening shifts, I had my boyfriend stay with me to ensure my safety. There's a chance that the guy in that circling vehicle were unrelated, but the anxiety and the weird vibes I got from Michael that night didn't sit well with me. So, Michael, let's hope we never cross paths again. Around 4 years ago, I landed my very first job as a certified nursing assistant at a nursing home in my cozy little town of Rocky Mount, Virginia. I was thrilled to start because I had a deep passion for taking care of people, and I was also excited about making my own money. Typically, I worked the evening shift, from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. However, on this particular night, my colleague Dawn and I had to stay until 12:30 because the aides coming in after us were running late. This meant that we weren't in a rush to finish our tasks for the night. Working the night shift had its share of eerie occurrences, and I knew this from my past experiences. I often got assigned to work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. due to staffing shortages. I'd witness strange things like shadows, call lights going off in unoccupied rooms, or alarms sounding when someone had just passed away. Sometimes I could even swear I heard whispering. But on this specific night, something terrifying happened that was far from the usual spooky stuff. During my orientation, which took place roughly 3 months prior to this incident, a fellow aide gave me a stern warning. She told me never to venture outside alone to dump the trash, especially at night. See, one of our responsibilities as second and third shift CNAs was to dispose of the trash because there were no housekeeping staff or chefs around during those hours. She strongly advised me to always have someone accompany me because there was a man who roamed around the dumpsters at night. He had a history of trying to harm young women who were alone. She mentioned that multiple reports had been made to the police, but by the time they arrived, the man had always disappeared. Back then, I didn't take her warning too seriously. I thought she was just trying to spook me. On the night of this incident, it was nearly 12:20, just about time for me to head home. I volunteered to take out the trash so I could chat with my boyfriend on the phone while I was out there. At this point, I had completely forgotten about the co-worker's ominous advice from 3 months earlier. I had my 2 barrels of trash in tow as I stepped out into the pitch-black night. The light that usually illuminated the area around the dumpsters had been out of order for over a week, and the repairman hadn't fixed it yet. Annoyed by the prolonged darkness, I switched on the flashlight on my phone and made my way to the dumpsters. As I was emptying the second barrel, I suddenly heard footsteps. Initially, I assumed it was another aide from a different wing, probably bringing out their trash. Then it hit me, the co-worker's warning from months ago. Those footsteps were getting closer, and I saw a man approaching with his hands in his pockets and a creepy, unsettling smile on his face. He didn't say a word. Realizing the danger, I knew I had to get out of there. I pushed my trash barrels into him, which momentarily stunned him, and then I sprinted faster than I ever had in my life towards the building. As I was about to turn the corner of the building that led to the back door, I couldn't help but glance back, and I saw a man who looked like the one my co-worker had warned me about. I wondered if he was just trying to frighten me, or if he had something much worse in mind. All I knew was that I'd never go out there alone again. Hello, everyone! If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful or entertaining, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Your support motivates us to create more content you'll love. Thanks a million. And if you've just subscribed, please drop a comment saying I subscribed. We'd love to welcome you to our community.